Hello. I want to say thank you. Thank you for investing in yourself, and thank you for taking some time to dig a little deeper into a very important topic. And that topic is you. That topic, honestly, is me too. So as I prepared for this teaching, boy, the Lord brought some things to the surface that kind of was a reminder that I'm still a process He's working on as well. So this video that you're watching today is a part of the Whole Leader initiative from our New York Ministry Network. And we believe wholeheartedly that healthy churches should be made up of healthy leaders. The subject of this video resource is one that impacts you, it impacts me, and it touches the lives of every single person that we interact with on a daily basis. Emotional maturity or emotional health is the continuous attempt to understand, express, and regulate the full range of our emotions clearly, intentionally, regardless of the circumstances. So emotional maturity is something that is so very, very important for all of us to grasp. You know, at the leadership level, emotional health and emotional maturity helps to foster personal and organizational success. People who are emotionally healthy are generally more content, more confident, and more optimistic. Now, at the team level or the group level, emotionally healthy teams are more resilient in the face of adversity. Emotionally healthy teams have a greater ability to respond to changes that come. And also, emotionally healthy teams can better achieve challenging goals. Now, that's going to be concentrated on in a different video, talking about how emotional health impacts groups and teams. But for today, I want to kind of get that across to you as we dig a little deeper into this topic. Now, to be a whole leader and to be a healthy leader, we have to be in touch with our emotions. We have to strive toward emotional maturity. Now, other videos and resources will focus on some other aspects of emotional maturity. Self-awareness is one, interpersonal empathy, and I encourage you to review the material that is available to you if not already taken advantage of that. But the main focus of this video resource is regulated response. Now, a great definition that I came up with and saw and kind of orchestrated here is that regulated response is responding to internal, interpersonal, and situational changes and uncertainty in a very balanced and intentional manner. So, what are some examples of emotional regulation? If I was you, that's what I'd be asking myself right now. Well, emotional regulation is a practice of cultivating a sacred buffer of time between feeling the emotion and your reaction to that emotion. All of us know what that means. All of us have been in situations where you hear some news that really sets you back a little bit and you sort of take a deep breath and have to process that a little bit. You know, so you pause and collect your thoughts before you respond. To pause and collect our thoughts before we respond. Sometimes it also means waiting until you're in a more supportive setting to process through some of those feelings. It can mean a variety of things like that. Well, for example, self-awareness is a very broad topic. We have a teaching on that in another video, and we're grateful that we have some other amazing resources to offer to you in that regard. But when we talk about self-awareness, it involves knowing yourself well enough to be in tune with what you're thinking, feeling, and how you are responding. Notice what I said there, how you're thinking, how we're feeling, and how we're responding. You know, some people are very vulnerable when they're feeling certain things. I know for me, I use the word hangry. It's probably not a good thing to admit, but there's times when I recognize I'm a little bit hungry. I recognize I'm a little more vulnerable to feeling edgy or feeling a little angry or feeling touchy. Just, you know, how responding to people sometimes, if I haven't eaten for a while, I'd love to say my blood sugar is dropping. I don't think that's it for me. I'm hangry. So some of you can relate to that. But for some people, they're very vulnerable when they're hungry or when they're angry or when they're lonely or when they're tired or when they're bored or when they're anxious. Some people are most vulnerable if they're feeling depressed. So we have to be aware of what we're feeling and how we're feeling. That helps us to regulate our responses. I love Galatians chapter 5, very familiar portion of Scripture for most of us. It talks about the fruit of the Spirit being love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So when we think about, Lord, how am I to respond in these circumstances? That should be really one of the core things that help generate our responses. So when we talk about regulated responses, learning how we respond and getting to know ourselves is so very, very vital. I know for me, helping others to understand their personal temperament and their style and how it affects others is so very, very vital when we talk about regulating our responses. For example, the first thing is composure. Composure. You know, if I'm able to stay consistent in character despite the situation, that's so very important. What do I mean by that? Well, all of us have been in scenarios where we've heard some news come forth, and you knew that if you responded in your most basic way of shock or anger or grief in that moment, it wouldn't be the best for that situation. So we have to concentrate on our composure. I think of Psalm chapter 37. It says this, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath, and do not fret. It leads only to evil." See, I love that where it says refrain from anger. Refrain from anger. That basically means take a deep breath, recognize that this is a hot topic for you. The situation you've walked in it causes you to be on edge, and it's important for us to refrain from anger. I love James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. Here's what it says. It says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." So it's important, again, that we learn about our composure and concentrate on the need for that to happen and embrace that. Another thing, number 2, is reflection. I can sense, when I reflect, I can sense that I'm having an emotional response, whether it's positive or negative. So what do I mean by that? Well, we reflect on what's causing some physiological responses in our body. Sometimes you can feel your neck or your cheeks flushing with blood. I mean, you look in the mirror and they're red. You've seen that, where you can tell someone's not happy with what they're hearing, and their face gets red. They're responding in a way that is probably leading down a path that's not a positive path. I have a friend of mine that often will say, there's not a whole lot of life down that path. So it's important that you and I learn how to reflect on what we're sensing and what we're feeling. Another thing is empathy. I'm able to take a very personal experience as a way to relate as opposed to a way to control or to be defensive. So we're empathetic toward what someone else is going through. We're not defensive. We take a breath before we respond, and we just try to put ourselves in their shoes. What would I be feeling if I was in their shoes right now? I may not be able to relate to their experience, but we've all known issues of grief and loss and disappointment and regret. So some of those general terms, if you can empathize, that's very, very important. So again, I want to repeat what a regulated response is. The definition is this: responding to internal, interpersonal, and situational changes and uncertainty in a balanced and intentional manner. That's what we're talking about by having a regulated response. Another thing is patience. Patience. If you're able to stop and slow down when you're feeling an inappropriate emotion in the moment, everybody wins. If we can stop and say, "Lord, you're going to help me in this situation. I'm going to get a different perspective. I'm going to be patient with myself. Lord, I don't have to respond right now. I can think this through." I love the phrase emotional resilience. It's sort of attached to this. Without emotional resilience, challenges turn into traumas, and traumas can turn into disaster. In other words, you got to catch a grip on what you're feeling and how you're responding and what you're verbalizing, or those challenges turn into traumas, and those traumas can very, very easily turn into disasters. So with emotional resilience, we bring a centeredness and a calmness to times of crises that enable us to assess what's coming at us and how to best handle it. You know, in a constantly changing world and a constantly changing culture that we're living in, resilience gives us the constancy within ourselves to handle the inevitable ups and downs of life. You know, whether we're re-emerging from a personal tragedy or coping with volatile global markets and our finances or trying to tackle an unexpected organizational turmoil. And as leaders, we have those unexpected calls, don't we? As leaders, we have that person that knocks at the door and says, can I have a moment? And you never know what they're going to bring to the table. So it's our ability to be emotionally resilient that pulls us through these moments. Another thing is humble. How to be humble in these moments. I don't feel the need to always be right, and I can admit when I'm wrong. I heard a great quote once. It says, talent is God-given, be humble. Fame is man-given, be grateful. And conceit is self-given, be careful. Very, very important that we remain humble. It helps us to process who we are and to put things in perspective. One last thing is fruit. Fruit. What do I mean by that? Well, if I'm able to keep the fruit of the Spirit as the goal in response to situations, boy, that's a good guideline, isn't it? The fruit of the Spirit. And I don't know about you, but as I read through these once again, love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. You know, on any given day, I'm doing pretty good on 2 or 3 of them, but I'm still struggling on 1 or 2 of them. Sometimes that changes. Next week, I'll be a little more victorious on the one, but yet struggling with the other. So we always have to recognize that if we're looking at the fruit of the Spirit as our all-encompassing goal, as we talk about emotional responses, that helps us to put a framework about what God would have us to do in that situation. So again, regulated responses, responding to internal, interpersonal, and situational changes in a balanced and intentional manner. My prayer is that for you, you have an intentionality to your responses. People not only judge us by our words, but they judge us by our actions and how we make them feel. Very, very important. Very, very important. So God bless you. I trust that some of these thoughts have spurred some thoughts in your heart and in your mind, and maybe even for some others around the circle to discuss. But God bless you. Thank you for your service to our King.